Over the last 8 years, the Vikings have played the Packers 15 times. That is the amount of Vikings-Packers games there have been in the Mike Zimmer era. And the 16th and possibly final one is happening on Sunday. So I thought it would be pretty cool to do a little retrospective on those games and the moments that they represent within the history of both the Vikings and the Packers. We'll also do a little bit of game preview stuff with your bold predictions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today, I figured we'd, take a trip down memory lane. We already kind of broke down the Packers in a lot of depth once. They're a big RPO team, so be on your P's and Q's as RPOs. Make sure Devontae Adams doesn't end up singled up on a cornerback that can't handle him. And then on the other side of the ball, don't let Kenny Clark kill your interior offensive line. And if Jair Alexander is playing, he's probably going to shut down whoever you put on him one-on-one. So get Justin Jefferson away from him if you can. Put him on the rookie, put him on Shannon Sullivan or whatever. We talked a lot with Peter about all of this too yesterday with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers. So instead of rehashing all of that, I was reflecting a lot, I guess. After my conversation with Peter last week, I was thinking a lot about something that we talked about, which is that this might be the last time the Mike Zimmer and Aaron Rodgers go toe-to-toe. Two of football's great strategic minds going head-to-head. And of course, not to take away from Matt LaFleur, but really the Zimmer-Rodgers thing is the thing that has lasted the test of time, right? LaFleur is relatively new to this, so it's really Zimmer-Rodgers. And if you listen to either of those two talk about each other, they have so much respect for each other as adversaries, and the gamesmanship between the two, how they all talk about, well, now we know each other so well and stuff, and the pressure packages and the tricks and little misdirections that come out of the Packers side is all fascinating. You could write 2 books on the matchups, the 15 matchups, and this will be the 16th, between Mike Zimmer and Aaron Rodgers over the years. But from a fan's perspective, those matchups all represent such integral moments in both of the franchise's kind of histories throughout that time. And I thought it would be cool to do a little retrospective, to remember every Vikings-Packers game that we have had since Mike Zimmer took over as the head coach of the Vikings. And this isn't a guarantee that this is the last one, but it feels like it could be. Aaron Rodgers, his status in Green Bay is tenuous. Mike Zimmer's status in Minnesota is more tenuous. It is very possibly the last Vikings-Packers matchup we get in this era. And if you want to look at the history of a franchise, look no further than their games against their division rivals. So let's take a look down memory lane, and let's start with the first time Mike Zimmer as a head coach went up against the Green Bay Packers. Of course, it wasn't the first time that he had played the Packers. He actually played the Packers the year before this in 2013, but 2014, the Vikings traveled to Lambeau Field. I want to say it was week 5 in a Thursday night football game. And in Teddy Bridgewater's first start as a franchise quarterback, if you remember, that game was against the Atlanta Falcons. His first play came against the Saints. He didn't start that game. Matt Castle got hurt in that game, and then Teddy Bridgewater took over. And then his first start was against the Atlanta Falcons, which was a win. That the Vikings won that game, and it was a very exciting time for Bridgewater, but he did get hurt in that game, and he couldn't play on a short week going into Thursday Night Football against Green Bay. So who stepped in but Christian Ponder, who I believe this would be his last start of the game. I'm going entirely off the cuff here, so correct me if my recollection of any of this stuff is wrong. But that would be the last time, for sure that would be the last time he would play for the Vikings. And it was, perhaps predictably, a disaster. The Vikings got absolutely shellacked. The final score was 42-10. And we all probably drank ourselves into oblivion and tried to get ready for the next game. The next time would be at TCF Bank Stadium. course, 2014, that was when the Vikings were at TCF Bank because US Bank Stadium was under construction on the ground where the Metrodome was. They had to knock over the Metrodome before they built the new stadium, and that meant we had to be at a college stadium for a couple of years, and this was one of 2 times the Green Bay Packers would play in that stadium, and the Vikings would lose again. That was a 24-21 loss that I remember hurting me quite a bit because it felt like the Vikings had a chance in that one. They would score to go down 21-24, and then the Packers would get the ball back with like 4.5 minutes left, trying to chew clock, and they just chewed out the whole clock. They didn't score. They didn't do anything else. They ended up kneeling on it because the Vikings were out of timeouts. If I remember, there was a frustrating reason for that, and that was pretty disgusting. So the Zimmer era started with 2 losses to the Packers. That was the 2014 season. He went 7-9. Obviously, there wasn't much more expectation than that. But 2015, there was. And when the Packers came to TCF Bank Stadium for the first time that year, it was again in November, literally 364 days away from the last time they played the Packers, just one day earlier in the calendar year. And the Vikings were coming off of a huge win streak. They were on a 5-game win streak. They were feeling good. And basically, it kind of felt like the division was in the balance in this game. And Aaron Rodgers and the Packers came to town, and they gave the Vikings a wake-up call. 30-13 was the final score of that one, and it was an utter catastrophe. And it really made you question if the Vikings were for real, and then suddenly the back part of the season got kind of hairy. The Vikings would end up 11-5 on that season, wrapping out with the final game against the Green Bay Packers. It happened on January 3rd, 2016, and that was for the division. If the Vikings won, they win the division. If the Packers won, they won the division. At Lambeau Field, you probably remember the game. Cordero Patterson had a kickoff return that almost went for a touchdown. He ended up fumbling it. Teddy Bridgewater threw the worst interception I've ever seen. But despite all of that, the Vikings and Mike Zimmer's vaunted defense shut Aaron Rodgers down in the winter at home, and the Vikings would go on to win the game, win the division, and host a playoff game that year. We won't talk about what happened in that playoff game because it didn't happen against the Packers, but in a funny turn of events, that was the year that Green Bay would travel to Washington and play none other than Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. The next season, 2016, US Bank Stadium had been built, and the home opener of that season was against the Green Bay Packers. Now, I don't know if you all remember this, but my God, I wanted that game. And I bet Packers fans felt the same way. They wanted to spoil it because there was so much to do about the new stadium. The Wilfs had threatened to move the team to LA, or at least there was rumors about that. I don't know if there's ever any substance to that, if it was just kind of blustering to get a new stadium deal. The stadium was so hyped up. It was so beautiful. It was such this big project, 2 years in the making. And finally, they were going to play a full-on game, not a preseason game, but a full-on regular season game that counts in US Bank Stadium. And the Packers, more than anything, wanted to ruin that. But that game ended. And by the way, that was the Sam Bradford opener, right? That was the first Sam Bradford game because that was the year Teddy blew his knee out. And the Vikings had panic traded for Sam Bradford like 2 seconds before week 1, so he couldn't play week 1. He didn't know enough he had only been in the building for like 2 days. And then he learned enough, at least over the course of the week, where he could play against the Green Bay Packers in week 2 for the home opener. And he did enough. The Vikings would win that game on none other than a Trey Waynes interception. Trey Waynes, who was much maligned for a poor showing in his rookie season of 2015, intercepted Aaron Rodgers to seal the home opener. And if there's nothing else Trey Waynes did for the Minnesota Vikings organization, at least there's that, because that is going to be important in the hearts of Vikings fans forever and ever and ever, because we won't have to deal with Packers fans telling us that they ruined our stadium. The next time the Vikings would play the Green Bay Packers, it was Christmas Eve of that year. The Viking season had totally gone tits up, and they needed to beat the Packers and get a crap load of help, not dissimilar from this season, and they got blown out. The final score was 38-25, but it wasn't that close. There was a lot of garbage time in there. However, that was the game where Adam Thielen, if you ask me, truly broke out. In 2013, he didn't make the team. In 2014, he was a role player. 2015, he was just kind of like, he was like a backup. He was behind, Mike Wallace and Charles Johnson, and, he wasn't the main guy. But 2016, he truly showed himself to be a premier wide receiver. And when 2017 would roll around, the Diggs-Thielen combination would truly be what it was for that 3-year stretch where those were the two guys. And it started, I think, on Christmas Eve at Lambeau Field when Adam Thielen caught, 2 touchdowns, 100 some yards, this crazy, crazy, amazing game. That was his breakout game. Even though the Vikings lost, it was this really important moment in at least our relationship to somebody who became one of our favorite players. I want to keep going with this. This is all super fun. But first, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. Built Bar is absolutely delicious, and it is the New Year's. That means New Year's resolutions. That means y'all are trying to lose or maintain weight. Come on, don't lie to me. I know that's what you're doing. You're counting calories and all of that stuff. And Built Bar is the protein bar that will help you satisfy that candy bar craving. But if you're counting calories, it's not going to ruin all of your math. Might even be better than candy bars. It's covered in 100% chocolate. It's absolutely delicious, and it tastes so good that you will want to actually grab one out of the fridge. You're not going to settle for this candy bar. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein or something around there. Compare that to a candy bar that usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So, pack a bunch of these things in the fridge. When it is degenerate hours of the night and you want a terrible snack for you, reach for a Built Bar and you will thank yourself in the morning. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is decent for you. And there's a bunch of flavors to choose from, like peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, etc. So go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and get 15% off of your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. So the college football playoff is coming up. Go check out our ultimate college football preview. It's one of a few things like this that we've done on the Locked On Network. It is a separate podcast feed. The ultimate college football playoff preview has been live all week, so go catch up on that over the weekend while you prepare to watch those games. Let's continue with this little retrospective of every Vikings-Packers game we have seen in the Mike Zimmer era. We're at 2017. And if you remember, the first game in 2017 happened on October 15th, 2017. I want to say it was week 7. The Vikings would win that game 23-10 on the way to, of course, their NFC Championship. This is the miracle season, but you remember what happened in that game, right? That was the game where Anthony Barr infamously broke Aaron Rodgers' collarbones. Of course, Brett Hundley would come in and play out the rest of that game with the Packers. They would only score 10 points. It was a total disaster. And then later, a couple days before Christmas of 2017, the Vikings would travel to the Green Bay Packers to Lambeau Field, and they would blank them. Now, I don't know how long it had been since the Packers were blanked at home. I probably knew back at the time, but that was delicious. I know it was Brett Hundley, and I know it was kind of a Packers team that had basically been eliminated. They didn't really care anymore. Who cares, right? I don't care. You go out in front of your fans 2 days before Christmas, you get blanked by a hated rival. That feels good to be that hated rival. I loved that game. Shoot, I might rewatch it later. A game I did not love was the next one. So the 2018 season, of course, this was the beginning of Kirk Cousins. This was week 2, the first Kirk Cousins road game. And I was lucky enough to be there. My dad and I traveled out to Green Bay to watch this game. So we were in the stands for the week 2 game. Laquan Treadwell scored, I believe, his first career touchdown, which is hilarious because he was a third-year player. And he also caused an interception. If I remember, he was targeted on a play in this one. So this was an incredibly crazy game. The Vikings trailed for all of it. And Laquan Treadwell, in a comeback effort, had a ball tip right off of his hands directly into the waiting arms of a Green Bay defensive back. And I thought that sealed the game. So my dad and I left. I had a flight to catch, so we thought we would get out and get to the airport with time to spare. We got booed walking down the stands, and it was all fun, ribbing. They were like, go home. That's what you get, blah, 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 because we were leaving early. And the Packers fans were all partying. Outside Lambeau Field, there are just neighborhoods. It's just like a suburban area. And in those houses, everybody's watching the game on their big TVs. And so we actually stopped and watched the rest of the game in the house. We had been staying at one of those houses, and we actually stopped in that house, watched the rest of the game. We said, what's going on? And much to our surprise, the Vikings somehow had the ball back. They actually tied that game up with one of the craziest Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen throws. I mean, this is one of the craziest throws of Kirk Cousins' career. It happened 2 weeks into his time with the Vikings, and we were all going, maybe this guy's a guy. It was a pretty good Kirk Cousins game, if I remember. And they would end up tying. This was also the game where Daniel Carlson missed 3 field goals, got cut, and then went and became a franchise kicker for the Raiders. all these really interesting moments all coming to fruition here. You know, the beginning of the Kirk Cousins era, the Daniel Carlson thing, a big tie, Adam Thielen's, Stephon Diggs getting a big long pass on the post down the sideline. Really big moments coming in that Week 2 2018 game. The next game that happened, it was, I think, the Thanksgiving Sunday. I remember because I watched it on a plane, back home after Thanksgiving. The Vikings would win that 24-17. It was a fairly comfortable win on Sunday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers on prime time. The Vikings wouldn't make the playoffs. Neither would the Packers. Neither of these games ended up having like playoff implications or anything. I guess they did because, one more win for the Vikings, they would have had it. And were it not for that tie, I believe they would have made the playoffs. But that was an interesting season for the Vikings to now be 3-0-1 over the last 2 years against the Packers. Mike McCarthy goes, and now in comes the Matt LaFleur era Packers. And the first clash between Mike Zimmer and Matt LaFleur came in Week 2, 2019. And the first quarter was an outright catastrophe. The Vikings went down 21-0 in the first quarter. And throughout the rest of that game, they scratched and they clawed. Dalvin Cook got a breakaway touchdown, and they actually made it 16-21. But at the end of that game, Kirk Cousins threw one of the worst interceptions he's ever thrown. And he, even at the end of the game, he was like, yeah, that was terrible. And the Vikings would end up falling in that game. And they wouldn't meet again until the second to last week in the season, a couple days before Christmas, which happens with the Vikings and Packers all the time. And they would end up having Kirk Cousins ended up having one of the worst games of his time as a Viking in this one as well. He did really poorly against the Packers in 2019. They would lose 23-10 to the Packers. And they would end up kind of backing into the playoffs on a 2-game losing streak. But then, that would be the Superdome Saints game with the Kyle Rudolph touchdown at the end in overtime. And then, of course, they went and lost to the 49ers. The Vikings would then find the Packers, and this is now pretty recent memory, in 2020, September, Week 1. The first COVID game with no fans, and the Vikings came out totally flat with no energy. They would lose the game 43-34, but it was not as close as that looked. The Packers were up by 3 scores for most of the game. There was a little bit of garbage time, and the Vikings made it look a little bit more respectable, but it was an absolute catastrophe game. This was the game where Holton Hill ended up one-on-one for like the whole game with Davante Adams, and it was this terrible thing. The Vikings just could not get anything going defensively. All of their cornerbacks got absolutely wrecked by Aaron Rodgers, who was, after the game, he relished, oh my God, I get to go on the road and have a quiet environment. This is fantastic. So that was where we all started to kind of worry. And of course, the Vikings would start off that year on a terrible note. They would go 1-5, go into their bye, and come out of it and have to take the Green Bay Packers, who were 6-1 at the time. I think they were incredible, maybe even 7-0. And the Vikings went into Lambeau and actually stole one. You remember that awesome game. Of course, the wind was blustering around and nobody could throw. So it was a very run heavy game. And Dalvin Cook ended up scoring 4 touchdowns. One of them was a screen, but still, that was an incredible Dalvin Cook game. And it ended up coming down to the Packers down 22-28, down 6 points, driving for the final game-winning touchdown. And that was the one that ended on the DJ Wonnum strip sack. I should also point out that Eric Kendricks 1v1'd Davante Adams a couple times. A horrible mismatch, and he actually did it. One of the most impressive things I've ever seen. That leads us to the 2021 matchup, which happened just a few weeks ago, where the Vikings would win on a game-winning field goal from Greg Joseph, after, of course, a hero touchdown by Justin Jefferson, a whole bunch of heroics, and a pretty good outing on the whole. That was 15 matchups. Number 16 is coming this week. We are going to get into the bold predictions, however, and I'm excited to do that. But first, if you have any less bold predictions, the kind of thing a sportsbook would have, you can bet on them. Gamble at betonline.ag. You can gamble on whatever you want. Pro football, the college football playoffs, basketball, hockey, volleyball, golf, MMA, whatever you can think of, even your favorite Vegas casino game. So head on over to betonline.ag. Use promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. You can get a 50% welcome bonus. That means that whatever your first deposit is, half of it matched and plopped right into your account. That is promo code LOCKEDON at betonline.ag, where the game starts. Are you ready? to get bold. Welcome to the bold prediction segment. This is a tradition we have every Friday where we just come up with the craziest takes we can and see if we can't predict something crazy happening. Something crazy is always happening with the Vikings, right? We just have to guess what random nonsense it is. We've only gotten one of them ever in the history of the show, which is the way it should be. And you can always send these to me at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. Let's go over really quick the ones from last week. Let's see if any of them hit. Gabrielle Greco started the things off with a something to zero scoregami. It was not scoregami, nor was it something to zero. It was a fairly normal score, 23-30. Nikaka said that Oli Udoh would have more tackles than Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald dominated and got a crap load of tackles, so obviously that didn't happen. A fate worse than Seth said that Pierce would get a pick six with a top speed faster than Linval's from 2018. So this didn't happen, but funny story. I was in stands for this game and I saw one of the bar picks. And I couldn't tell who it was. I just saw the 5 on his back, and I thought 55 was 58 for a split second. And it was the one that Barr returned back to like the 2. And I was like, oh my goodness, this has a chance. It has a chance. He's like kind of fighting back through, and he's running pretty fast, like as fast as it looked like, it looked like he was kind of fighting through tackles, but running as fast as he could through that traffic. And I thought so, and then I came up and it was Anthony Barr. I was like, I thought that was Michael Pierce. It was like a tipped thing. It could have totally been Pierce. Pierce did get a pass breakup though, which I feel like in spirit gets that, because I don't know if Linval Joseph ever made like a coverage play. Ben Olsen said that Greg Joseph would throw a first down pass, and so would Johnny Hecker. I was very worried about a fake a couple of times, and I think it's because, Ben, you put that in my head, but they never ran one, thankfully. Waka Waka said that Kupp would have more yards than the entire Vikings offense. And he would say that that would have to be like a 250 plus yard game for both. So Cooper Kupp got 109 yards. So he had a fantastic game. He didn't, of course, set a bunch of records, and the Vikings got lots of offense. They got over 300 yards of offense. So that probably wasn't going to be there, but I love where you were headed. And Vikings Uncensored had a whole thing about Kirk not going due to his rib injury and Mannion also going out, and that Kellen Mond would actually come in and win the game. I would have counted this. He said that Mannion would go out like early in the first half. I would have counted Mannion going out for COVID and Kirk going out for COVID or injury or whatever. Like, I was going to not hold you to the reason, but I was going to say, like, look, any reason we have that Kellen Mond's going to be the principal quarterback and he comes in and win the game, I was pretty much going to give you. But obviously we didn't quite get there, but we got like closer than is comfortable. I don't know. Let's move on to the ones for this week. Week 17, we are going to start with Kyle Slaby, the champ, the only person to get one of these right, who says that the Vikings would lose by the lowest recorded temperature during the game on Sunday night. So -1 degree temperature, which is the current projected low as he typed that, would mean that the Vikings win by a point. A 7-degree low means the Vikings lose by a touchdown. So he also gave me a link to look this up. I absolutely love this, especially since the temperature is supposed to hover around 0, which implies it would be a 1-score game, which is all but a guarantee because it's the Vikings and they are like cosmically that like every game has been a 1-score game except for one. I'm still pretty sure. Technically, some of them have needed some garbage time points to get there, but still it's like cosmic. So this has a good enough chance to cash where they'll be in the same range, and you just have to get lucky that it like happens to be exactly 4 points and 4 degrees or whatever it ends up being. Purple's Pride Skull said that a Vikings player would do the Lambeau leap, and some liquored up Packers fan overreacts and aggressively shoves the player, calls him a derogatory name, which prompts a mini scuffle. So here's the deal. I'm going to adjust this one a little bit because it's like a weirdly specific thing. We might not even see that kind of thing. But a Vikings player doing a Lambeau leap needs to be a part of it, and I'm going to expand this to make it a little bolder for you and say that this has to end in a flag on a Packers fan. If there is a flag on a Packers fan after a Vikings player does the Lambeau leap, I'm giving this to you. But I needed something measurable to happen. I can't say, oh, well, was there a scuffle or was it just a little jawing or blah, blah, blah. I wasn't going to be wishy-washy about that. I need a 15-yard flag on the Packers fans for this to cash. And honestly, because I know I've seen your name in these all the time. I hope that you and I know you understand the like vibes of bold predictions. I hope you understand. Liam Thrailkill said that CJ Ham would be the second leading receiver by receptions. He also did not specify for the Vikings or for the whole game, so I'm going to default to bolder and say that CJ Ham is the has the second highest reception total in the game, which would imply, assuming Devontae Adams doesn't get hurt or something, that he leads the Vikings. And that is hilarious, and I love it in a bold prediction segment. Young Sandwich says that A punter situation in Green Bay forces them to always go for it on fourth, resulting in no less than 5 turnovers on downs in favor of the good guys. Now, I know they've had some punter problems. I don't know what punter situation means. I haven't seen like a COVID thing or anything like that, so I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But okay, 5 turnover on downs in favor of the good guys. Got it. We got 4, I think. No, we got 3 against the Bears. So we were on the way there. Tyler Lindenbaum enthusiast says that Kenny would return 4+ kickoffs, and he ends up in Packers territory on all of them. So he needs to be across the 50 on all of his kickoffs, and there needs to be 4 or more of those kickoffs. I absolutely love it. Again, the Packers have had all these special teams problems over the last couple of weeks. So all these special teams weird things are like totally in play. Returning 4+ kickoffs isn't that bold. Of course, getting across the 50 is like very bold. But I love that you made it like it had to be a certain volume. Otherwise, if he only ever returned 1 kickoff and the rest went out of the end zone, and then that kickoff was good, like you could backdoor it. I love making it so you have to really get this in spirit. And the final one comes from Chris, who said all of the plays going more than 20 yards will happen on special teams. Again, I love how much we are roasting the Packers special teams on this. This is fantastic, and I hope the Vikings can take advantage of it, and also that it will just be like plotting winter cold football. It's going to be a cold game. It's going to be an interesting game. Of course, the Vikings' lives are on the line here. If they lose, they are... I think they could technically still be in it if like everything breaks their way, but they would be in like desperation mode, where they need like 3 different teams to lose out if they don't win out, if the Vikings don't win out. So they need this game. Everything's on the line. The iteration is on the line. Zimmer's job is on the line. Everything comes down to this one. And I kind of wouldn't rather it be anybody but the Packers, because that needs to be who it is. So I'm looking forward to watching the game. I hope y'all are too. I will talk to you on the other side of all of this. We'll talk to you on Monday. So in the meantime, check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q handicapping expert Lee Sterling. I will talk to you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.